We are in this series called Christian Worldview, and we are learning about different attributes of God and how that shapes our worldview. So in this video, I would like to talk about some of the general points that we are talking about when we are talking about divine attributes. Some of the things that I would like to talk about in the coming weeks are: number one, divine simplicity. And number two is laws of logic and how that will help us understand some of the attributes and its complexity. Number three is we will talk about a terminology called anthropomorphism. That is about when Bible attributes human characteristics to the divine revelations, like when some places Bible is talking about that righteous right hand of God or something like that. At least in this video we will tackle this divine simplicity, and in the coming weeks we will talk about laws of logic, and we will also talk about anthropomorphism. So those are the things that I'm planning to do upcoming next videos. So all these three things has to be put into context for us to understand divine attributes clearly. Otherwise, there will be so many debates, so many questions, so many confusions when we talk about divine attributes. So when I hear debates about God and his attributes and how God can be this and that, and it doesn't make sense, it is not coherent, it is not logical, most of the time I think it comes from not getting these points clear. So I would like to clear those things first of all. And above all else, I wanted to say this in A.W. Tozer's book called The Knowledge of the Holy. He beautifully shares this. When we talk about divine attribute, what are we really talking about? That is what he explains. He explains like this: what is God like? If that is the question that we are asking when we are learning God's attributes, then essentially we are asking, what is God like? And that question can mean two different things. Number one thing is, what is God like in himself? If that is the question, then nobody knows the answer to it, because rightfully God is incomprehensible. So no human mind with a finite ability can grasp hold of this infinite God. So that's why we say that if we are asking this question, when we are learning these attributes, if we are asking this question, what is God like in himself, then that is a very futile effort. We will never get to that point. However, there is a purposeful point that purposeful journey that we can take in learning this God's attribute. That is the second type of asking the same question: what God revealed himself to be for us to know him, because he does purposefully reveal the truth about himself to us, and by all means we should pursue that. I think that is the most noble pursuit of any human being, so we need to do that. So that is what is the effort we are trying to do here. So by all these learning of attributes, we are not trying to reach to the point to know what God is like in himself. That is not what we're trying to do here, because God is incomprehensible, and I want to assert that point here. So let's move on to these three things that I said are generalized point that we need to know about God's attribute: is divine simplicity and laws of logic, finally anthropomorphism. So divine simplicity talks about it like this. Divine simplicity is a doctrine that is asserted by great theologians like Augustine, even A.W. Tozer's The Knowledge of Holy. In many places I feel like it asserts this doctrine called divine simplicity. A.W. Tozer always talking about, God doesn't possess these attributes. He is these attributes. He talks about that in many places, and he also talks about how we should not be differentiating these attributes. So what is this divine simplicity? Let's talk about, there are so many assertion in this, but then let's talk about two major things that I would like to point here. Number one thing is, divine simplicity says God does not possess these attributes, but God is these attributes. Comparing to human being, like I am passionate, I am short-tempered, I am creative. All these things are some of the characteristics I possess, but these characteristics are not I am. In a sense, this creativity might go away from me one day, but I will still continue to exist. This short-temperedness, I might work on it, but I will still exist. This passion, I might lose it, but I will continue to exist. But God, when we talk about God's attributes, we are not talking like that. We are not talking as though God have omnipotence, or God have omnipresence, or God have love, God have mercy. We are not talking like that. We are talking God is love, God is omnipotent, God is omnipresent, God is good. That is how we talk about God's attributes. So in that sense, God is not distinct from his attributes. So that is number one thing that divine simplicity talks about. And the second thing that divine simplicity talks about is that these attributes are not distinct from each other. So in a sense, God's love is not distinct from God's holiness. God's holiness is not distinct from his goodness. God's justice is not distinct from his love or mercy or anything in that sense. So God's attributes, so in an essence, when we talk about God's love, we are also talking about God's holiness, God's justice, God's righteousness, God's sovereignty. We are talking about all those things. God's love is not distinct from his all other attributes. In himself, all these attributes are just one. That is who he is. But in our understanding, then we look at it as God's love, God's mercy, God's goodness, God's sovereignty, God's justice, God's righteousness. We see it as it is, because for us it is very hard to comprehend all these attributes being one, because we are not beings like that. We don't possess anything in ourselves. We don't self-exist. We are created, but God is self-existent God. He is these attributes, and all these attributes are one in him. So that is how we need to understand God's attributes according to divine simplicity. But one big problem when we talk about God in view of divine simplicity, when we say God is omnipotent, God is omnipresent, God is sovereign, and all these attributes are not distinct from each other, it is all just one in himself, then that might make God look like he is a concept, or he is something, the idea of all these things put together. That is how it might look like when we think about it from this point of view, and that is a major danger in divine simplicity. However, Christian God is not a concept. He is a being. He is a real being. Also, all powerful, all loving, all present, all knowing being. He is a being. So he has intellect, he has will, he has emotions. But then his emotions are not like our emotions. His emotions are not affected by some other things or some other someone else or happening. So that we need to understand. So but he regardless have emotions, intellect, will. So he is a being, not a concept. So if someone is talking about, oh, I believe in a God, if a concept or an ideology is all powerful, all loving, something purely good without any evil, and that concept is what is God, as I believe, but I don't believe God is a being, then that is not God that we are talking about. Our God, he is a being. He has intellect, emotion, will, and all these things. He is very personal. That is the God that we serve, and we need to know that. So that is how we have to learn when we learn God's attributes. Divine simplicity is God does not possess these attributes. God is these attributes, and his attributes are not distinct from one another, but they are one in his essence. So that is how we need to understand God's attribute. And when we communicate about God's attributes, or when we think about God's attributes, when we try to comprehend his attributes, when we are trying to reason or debate or logically talk about God's attributes, we need to know that God does not possess these attributes, but God in His essence is His attributes. When you're trying to comprehend these revealed attributes of God, what are some of the issues that you are facing within your own faith and reasoning questions? So leave that in our comment section as much as possible. We will answer that question. And if you like this video, like, share, and comment. If you like all our videos, please subscribe to our channel. May God bless you. Thank you.